We recently just saw the man in yellow introducing himself to Clara, and when he did so, he said that Clara had made a deal with him shortly after she first arrived to Fromville. And what this tells us is that the man in yellow has been here for a while, moving the people of the town around like chess pieces since the very first episode of the show, because Clara had made a deal with him before the show even started. And when you consider how Victor's dad's descent into madness and his belief that Fromland is a dream is very similar to what happened to Boyd's own wife, which is the reason she went postal in the first place, and that everything going on with Victor's dad started with the man in yellow poisoning his drink with his blood, it makes you ask the question, has the man in yellow been in the town before? And if he has, who was he? And this is why this next scene matters so much.
What's your name? You have a kind face.
I'll talk to Boyd.
Who's Boyd?
He's the sheriff.
He seemed kind.
The old man in the dungeon is by far the most likely person to have been the man in yellow for so many different reasons that it's crazy. Like, we see the old man literally infecting Boyd with his blood, just like the yellow man did to Victor's dad. And both him and the yellow man also referred to Boyd being kind. Not to mention how both the old man and the yellow man specifically asked each of those two characters if they wondered if Fromland was all a dream. So the old man is clearly directly connected to the man in yellow in one form or another. And one of the craziest things people have been talking about recently is Kenny's mom's favorite dress being extremely similar to the dress that we see being worn by the real Sophia in the photograph found by Elgin. So many people have wondered if Kenny's mom was actually the man in yellow that entire time. What I will say is that the dress worn by Kenny's mom is slightly different to the dress that we see from the real Sophia. And yes, it's also different to the top that we see being worn by Clara as well. But from Tom the bartender, Father Cartry, and obviously Tilly, there's a lot of other characters who could have been the man in yellow, but one character whom no one is talking about whatsoever is actually Sarah's brother Nathan. Yes, the guy who got his neck sliced by Sarah when she was trying to kill Ethan. There's actually a lot of things about this guy that I think are kinda suspicious, but way too many people are ignoring. The first thing that led me to considering Nathan is that when the yellow man first arrives into Fromville in season 4, what did we see him doing? We saw him telling Kenny that he wanted to stay at Sarah's house specifically. And obviously we're meant to assume that the reason he picked that house is because of Sarah's presence. But what I want you to remember right now is this is the same house that Sarah's brother Nathan also used to live in right before he died. And it's possible that the man in yellow picked this house because he was already familiar with living in it when he was posing as Nathan. There's also the fact that the man in yellow being Nathan would have granted him physical access to Sarah, and it was implied that the physical proximity was somehow necessary for the voices to speak to her. So him being Nathan would explain how the voices kept finding their way to Sarah in season 1. But what really stands out about Sarah's brother comes from a piece of dialogue in the scene that I'm about to show you.
Sarah, look up. It's angry now. Nathan was right about this place. Over there. He'll be safe in there.
Do you think we made it angry? The way the lights exploded?
What are you talking about?
That storm came out of nowhere. It's almost like we made something angry.
Here we see something very peculiar when it comes to Sarah's brother, because just like we saw with Clara, Nathan also somehow knew that this place would fight back if the people kept trying to look for answers. And we know that Nathan knew this because the boy in white specifically uses him as a point of authority to convince Sarah and Boyd to go into the tree. And we also saw Sarah herself telling Boyd that same thing when they were walking through the forest. And now we know conclusively that the reason Clara had this information is because she had personally encountered the man in yellow when she first came into the town, which, may I point out, is a very weird way to phrase things because it possibly implies that Clara has been in the town once before and somehow left. However, what matters here in regard to Nathan is that how he gained the knowledge about this place fighting back when we look for answers is still a mystery, just like it used to be with Clara. And also, I want to point out that Nathan was the same guy who supposedly was absolutely terrified of the cicadas, and we have obviously been led to believe that the cicadas were created from Nathan's nightmares. But the whole monsters being created from nightmares thing has always been sketchy to me, because just like many people watching this show have pointed out many times before, there should be way more monsters running around Fromland if this place was actually just randomly manifesting monsters from people's nightmares, because the way it's currently being done implies that the entity is specifically choosing which nightmares to manifest and which ones to ignore. Basically, what I'm saying right now is that it could very easily be that the only reason Nathan's nightmare in particular is what was manifested, and not like somebody's fear of dragons or whatever, is actually because the entity knows that he can make cicada monsters but not dragon monsters. In other words, it's just psychological manipulation to make himself seem more powerful than he actually is, and this aspect could be further further strengthened in the narrative of the story if we eventually learn that Nathan was actually just the man in yellow that entire time. And this directly brings me to the next point.
Sarah, look up. Over there. You'll be safe in there.
You made it. I wasn't sure you would. We don't have much time.
Thanks for coming. I wasn't sure you would.
There are a lot of similarities in dialogue between the man in yellow and the old man in the dungeon, like how both of them refer to Boyd having a kind face and the whole maybe it's all a dream thing. And even the I wasn't sure you would dialogue is an odd similarity between the two characters. But what really connects them is how both of them are clearly working with the boy in white, as it was the boy who sent Boyd into the dungeon in the first place, and how we see the boy sending Tabitha to bring Victor's dad into the town, and then the man in yellow poisons him to make him kill his own son, Victor. It's very clear that the man in yellow is clearly cooperating with the boy in white, if they're not the same exact being. I also do want to point out that the boy in white's disappearing nature implies that he is a story walker. And when you look at how the man in yellow appeared to Tabitha at the RV, it was very similar to how he appeared right before he killed Jim. And after we saw Boyd story walking with the use of the torch in season 2, I do now believe that the man in yellow can also do that same thing, which might explain the ghost pretending to be Jim Matthews, or the Father Cartry ghost, or fake Abby who appeared in the dungeon. I'm also starting to consider if whether the reason that Julie can storywalk at all is because she was the only one of the 3 who got infected with the man in yellow's blood before Boyd arrived in the dungeon to save the rest of them. This is especially interesting when you consider that Boyd himself did not storywalk until after the old man infects him in the dungeon. It's also worth noting how we learned in this season that Jade refused to stop playing the violin, even after he knew that his grandmother was already dead in her bed. And Tabitha's obsession with saving the Yankui children is clearly tied to her loss of her baby boy, Thomas. Basically, both of them are completely unable to handle trauma and just choose to live in denial endlessly, which could be the reason they specifically are being targeted for the Save the Children narrative. And Victor actually says in season 3, when he was talking to Sarah at what is supposedly his mother's car, that he never made drawings of his father or anything that came before he arrived in Fromland. So he doesn't remember what his father looked like. It's a very weird line of dialogue, but maybe there's more going on with Henry's identity than we realize. I don't know. But what I want you to focus on right now is the scene with Clara and Sophia in the bedroom, as it's because of this scene that we now know for a fact that the man in yellow can literally threaten you with physical violence and torture right before making a deal with you. So what does that tell you about the Nightwalkers and the circumstances they were likely living in before they supposedly made the deal to sacrifice their children?